I think I got it working. 2 minutes late's not bad, and on the wrong service, but you know, it happens. So, for those of you that don't know me, if you're checking this thing out for the first time, of the Professional Casual Network here, I am Dan. I am the GM of a Grim Podcast, A Perilous Adventure, but I also dabble in a bunch of other things, especially Warhammer related, and today we're talking about the Soulbound, always do it the wrong way, the Soulbound Bestiary here, a super cool book. Cubicle 7 was awesome and sent me a copy of it, so I figured I might as well talk about it so people can see what's going on with this book. It's wicked cool. I really enjoy this book, as even if you're not running a campaign of Soulbound, it's just a really cool book to really get deeper into the lore of the Age of Sigmar, which when it first came out, I will say, preface this as I wasn't the biggest fan of the Age of Sigmar when it first came out, mostly because I was a big fanboy of Warhammer Fantasy, and just, you know, the simple fact that they destroyed the world really irked me for a while, and I swore it off for the first couple of years. And then the second edition of Age of Sigmar came out. I really gave it a shot. I loved the Deepkin. I thought they were super cool. I got really a lot more into the lore of it. And while I'm still not the biggest fan of the tabletop game, it's the Age of Sigmar, I think the setting is actually really cool. I really like the Mortal Realms. I think it has a lot going on. I mean, there's so much going on. It's almost too much, but there's so much cool stuff there that they've added over the years now that it's had some time to develop, that I'm not nearly as salty about it, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I was. So we played a little bit of Soulbound here on the network. We played through the starter set adventure, Faltering Light, with a few of us, and we love this system. So, like, even if you're not the biggest fan of Age of Sigmar as a setting, this system is fantastic. It's super fun. It's great to play these high-powered characters. So there's no like first level, you know, you're not going to be run-of-the-mill people in this. Very different from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which is what we play on a Grim Podcast, A Perilous Adventure. It has a very different feel where you can wipe out tons of enemies at once. Dani played a Deepkin character in Isharan. Oh no, I lost the word. Tidecaller? I forget. She was She was the magic user of the group, though, and she was able to wipe out a whole room of enemies with one spell, and she was like, that was awesome. And it's like, that's what this game is about. It's where Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is so much more about the nitty gritty, literally down in the dirt with people, and a lot more social interactions. Not that this game doesn't have that, but this game is a lot more about the bombastic things happening. Lots of awesome, crazy stuff going on. So your characters can do amazing things right from the beginning. The characters in the starter set were really cool, quite diverse. One of them was a Kurnoth Hunter who has the Hail of Doom, where it can just shoot a bunch of arrows all at once and just do a bunch of damage to enemies in an area, which is really cool. So the bestiary here, of course, is just what it sounds like, right? It's a collection of monsters. The tag on the front says, face down terrifying demons and titanic monsters in this bestiary of the Mortal Realms. Really cool stuff. We have on the cover there's a Mega Gargant fighting an ancient magma droth with the starter set characters that are kind of like the iconics of Soulbound here all around it. We have all 5 from the starter set. There's a dwarf engine rigger who can float with it's ether gold balloon. We've got a Sigmarite war priest, the Isharan, I think they're called Tide Callers, the magic user there, the Kurnoth Hunter, and then of course a Stormcast Eternal with sword and shield. So what's in this book? Obviously there's monsters in this book. I'm going to go over a little bit more about what exactly is in this book. So contents are a lot. This is over 190. It's 190 pages and then an index. So there's a ton of stuff. There's so much. The table of contents page doesn't even cover the first little bit that really kind of tells you how to use this page. Look at how packed that is. There's so much going on here. Gives you a little introductory, kind of reminds you how to read a creature stat block, which I love these in this game. I think they're really well done. They're elegant and easy to read. Tells you a bit about the creature type, whether they're automatons, beasts, demons, mortals, spirits, undead. If you're super new to this setting, it tells you a little bit about each of those, like how are undead different than spirits, how are automatons different than demons. that kind of thing, in case you weren't entirely sure. Then it has a bit about the creature's role, which is super important in this game. So they can either be a minion, a swarm, a warrior, a champion, or a chosen. And this kind of sets the difficulty compared to characters in this game. Because as you gain experience in this game, it's not like you have these huge leaps in power. You don't level up. You gain small amounts of experience, where the highest level listed in the book says 36 to 50 plus. I'll go over in a second, talks about how to build encounters if you're not running an adventure. I will say, if you are jumping into Soulbound with their first campaign for it, The Shadows in the Mist, this book isn't super necessary, because I was looking through, I haven't read through the whole thing yet, but I do want to play it eventually. I definitely want to play it and record it and all that. All the monsters seem to be all the monsters were either in that book itself or in the Soulbound rulebook. So this bestiary book is fantastic if you're doing some homebrew, if you're making your own adventure here. If you're using their printed stuff, I'm sure as things come out in the future, they'll say reference the bestiary, so it will be absolutely necessary. But it's a cool book anyway. I've just been enjoying reading it when I'm not even currently playing Soulbound, though I definitely plan on doing that. So we have minions. Minions are little things. They specify grots or clan rats. Most small animals would be considered minions. And what separates minions from other creatures is they have 1 toughness. So you hit them and they're dead. You do any damage to a minion and they're down. They are your fodder, your rank and file. Then we have swarms, which are swarms of minions, typically. So they have a toughness equal to however many minions are in that swarm, and as you do damage to them, they get weaker, they do fewer attacks, they can go down. They take double damage from effects that target a whole area. So if you have something like that Hail of Doom I mentioned before, if you do that and there's a swarm in the zone you're attacking, they take double damage from that, as more of them, because they're easier to hit. Pretty cool. Warriors are a little more on the level of the Soulbound themselves, but not quite. 1 warrior is typically not the equal of 1 Soulbound, but they do have more than 1 toughness, so you're going to have to hit them a few times to take them down. They have toughness equal to their body plus mind plus soul, similar to the Soulbound themselves. Then we have champions. Same thing, they have toughness equal to their body plus mind plus soul, and this is where they also gain a point of metal, usually 1, typically, where they can use it to do cool stuff like the characters can. And then the champions, where they get really scary, they have the same thing, toughness is equal to their body, mind, and soul, and a chosen also has wounds, so after you get through their toughness, you have to do wounds to them as well, and they also have metal. And this is where we get really powerful things that are probably better, one-on-one they are better than the characters. As an example, flip through quick, find a chosen. Oh, here's a good one. How about a Bloodthirster of Khorne as a chosen monster? So these things are disgusting. Now, obviously, with this, I'm not going to go through every single monster and read off their stats. That would be boring. I would have no throat left, and I'd probably get in trouble for copyright infringement. With the title of this is the overview and my review of this book, kind of give you an idea of just what's in it, how you can use it, what's going on here. Something I love, they also talk about size. Says from diminutive grots to the almost incomprehensibly large mega gargants, creatures come in all shapes and sizes in the mortal realms. So there's a few different types of sizes, but they don't really do anything mechanically until they become enormous or monstrous, and then they get extra stuff. They get more wounds, they get more toughness, and often more wounds as well. They can do a lot more damage if they hit something smaller. Then they have a great thing in here about building encounters. If you are doing anything homebrew or you're adding encounters to our already written campaign, they suggest a good encounter is going to do 1 or 2 wounds to the party, because after a combat you regain all your toughness. You kind of take a breather and then you're good to go. So you don't want your combats to only be plinking off toughness, or else they'll seem like they're not doing much anyway. You want them to be inflicting wounds on the party a little bit. Obviously, if it's like a boss fight, it should be relatively deadly to have that sense of danger in your game. One thing I really love is that they give you an idea of how to build an encounter based on the experience level of your party. So starting party doesn't have any extra experience. They say you should have 1 to 2 swarms of up to 10 minions. And that have to be in swarms, but if you have 10 minions running around, they might as well be a swarm anyway. And then 1 to 2 warriors per party member, and then optionally a champion or chosen to lead them, which is going to be a little bit more, that'd be more of a boss fight. If you have 15 to 35 experience, they recommend 2 to 4 swarms of up to 10 minions, 2 to 4 warriors per party member, and then again, optional 2 champions or a chosen to lead them. If you have more experience, typically this is spent on stat increases or new talents that make you better at stuff, so adding in more enemies makes sense. And then the last, the last tier is 36 to 50 experience, which is going to be a lot of play. They recommend 4 to 8 swarms of up to 10 minions each, 4 to 8 warriors per party member, again, and then optionally 4 champions or 1 chosen to lead them. So there's always 1 chosen, so you got to be a little careful. Obviously, you're not going to throw a bloodthirster at a starting level party as the 1 chosen. That would be a bit insane. Something more along the lines of I was going to say a beast lord, but even that's only a champion. Oh, like a Shaggoth, a dragon ogre Shaggoth would be a little more along the lines of that chosen. That would still be a tough fight for a starting party, I think. It can take a lot of damage. It's got a lot of cool stuff. They also have this awesome table of encounter complications. I know you're not going to really read this on the video, but just to show kind of the idea here is you have a D66 table where all kinds of other things to happen during the encounter. They say another good thing that makes encounters in Soulbound kind of unique is you want to regularly have an additional kind of hazard, or in this case they call them complications. Anything from the enemy has an unusual rare equipment, a fortification or choke point vital to a larger battle. There could be a specific foe that must be caught or killed before they escape. A set location that must be reclaimed. Enemies gain additional metal each round equal to the doom, the current doom. We have the floor ceiling is collapsing. All kinds of little things that can add some spice to the encounter. They also talk about how creatures shouldn't be displayed as mindless unless they actually have that rule. Play your characters smart as the GM. You want them to be giving your players a challenge. You don't want it to just be a steamroll thing. That's not a big, that's not really fun for anybody. So making sure that there's challenge in every fight. You're not throwing in fights just to give them fights, right? This isn't D&D. It's not like you have to have a fight every 2 hours of gameplay or whatever D&D recommends. A very different game, very different system. These fights tend to go very quickly because the characters are very powerful right from the beginning and they can just wade through enemies no problem. So you want to make sure that your fights mean something. And then also they have a little bit about using Doom, how Doom can affect the fight. Some of the monsters already have that built in, where some monsters do extra damage based on the Doom, or they soak extra damage based on the Doom, or they can do powers more often if the Doom is high. Really cool stuff. I love the inclusion of Doom. Another thing I really like about this book is the inclusion of these little black boxes, these little box outs that have all kinds of little extra things. Like this first one, it talks about additional loyal companions. With that talent, you can get a loyal companion, and they recommend what creatures from this book could also fulfill that they have in the core book. They have a list of them, but this adds a bunch more, like the Ether Wing, the Bat Swarm, a Demigriff, Frost Saber, or an Octar, which is my favorite, the octopus guy from Deepkin, or a spider. And then it says the Champions of Order, the other book, contains the Greater Loyal Companion Endeavor, which allows characters to bond with even more powerful creatures, which I'm sure there's a list of that in that book that the GM can go by, of course. So what else is in this book? What factions are covered? I'm sure a lot of people are wondering if you haven't looked at this yet. Obviously, you can pre-order this book and get access to the PDF anytime from the Cubicle 7 site, which is something I love that they do. Hey, Mohaniker, welcome to the stream. So we have Cities of Sigmar, which is something I really like that they added more like a good guys, in quote, that you can fight, so it's not just like Forces of Chaos. So basic things: Archer, Priest, Mage, Warrior, Cultist, and then like Cultist, Priest. I have Priest listed twice. That's kind of silly. So just kind of basic. If you have to have like, City Guard, you can use the Warrior stat block. Simple. The chapter 2, I really appreciate they added is the Forces of Order. So this includes any of again, the quote good guys from Age of Sigmar. So this they include rules for having stat blocks for different Stormcast Eternal, which is not in the core book. There are no Forces of Order in the core book. They assume you're being the good guys, you're fighting all the typical bad guys of the Warhammer world, but with things like Forces of Death coming out and Champions of Death and Champions of Destruction coming out soon. We can play whole parties of undead or of Oryx, or I assume you're going to be able to be an ogre. If you can be a 10, 11 foot tall Kurnoth hunter, I'm sure you'll be able to play as an ogre as well, which I'm really looking forward to. Hopefully there's some one-shots or things coming out specifically for that, because I know Tim on the network would lose his mind at being able to play an orc. He really likes the Iron Jaws because he calls them his construction worker orcs, and he would love to play that, and that'd be super fun to play with him doing that. So it has rules for Stormcast Eternal. It has some rules for other things like Fire Slayers or the Karajan Overlords, the things like Arcana Admiral, Grunstock Thunderer, Auric Runefather, and then it has some other little things like Dryads and Tree Lords, and then a couple little the minion type things like Namartis from Deepkin and Sisters of Cain and things like that. All kinds of cool stuff there. So if you're playing Forces of Death or Champions of Death or Champions of Destruction, it gives you some options to battle. You don't have to just fight other bad things. You can always change, things can be corrupted and still be considered the good guys, which is pretty cool. Then there's a big chapter for monsters and beasts that covers all kinds of, not really part of the faction, even if they're, used with that faction kind of creatures. Some of my favorites in there are the Alapex, again from the Deepkin, giant flying shark, as long as there's Ether Sea around, black dragon, bat swarms, Dracoline, griffins, all kinds of those types of creatures. One thing I do want to point out here, though, is as I was looking through this and kind of looking at it compared to the core book, there's no overlap with the core book, which is not my favorite thing about this book. I wish it included everything from the core book as well. So, there's the Ancient Magma Droth, super cool piece of art. But you look in the core book, with that same piece of art, they have the stats for a regular Magma Droth. Why they're not both in the book, I assume... I can understand they wanted to keep the page length down to keep it a little bit cheaper of a product. Being 35 American dollars is totally reasonable. Great price for this book. Say it's not super small, 180 or 190 plus pages. I'm totally fine with $35. Just double checking. Maybe this one's 44. Maybe this one's 45. Yeah, price $44.99. Sorry, $45. Still, that's less than most RPG books on the market anyway. So the fact that they didn't include things from the core book in here as well, I assume to keep the page count down. You've already got it somewhere else. If you have the Bestiary, you almost certainly have the core book anyway. So not reprinting them makes sense. But at the same time, I kind of wish they were all in the same book. I would have been okay with this being $5 more to be more complete and include everything. So if you're playing a game and you have monsters in a combat from both books, you don't have to be having both open at the same time, that kind of thing. So I kind of would have liked to have been more inclusive of all that. But everything in here is new at the same time compared to the core book. So that's also awesome. Charybdis, everybody likes those weird tentacle face things. They're really cool. I actually have one on the shelf behind me. Nope, put the wrong hand up. From my Deepkin army. I sold the rest of the army, but I hadn't ever painted the Charybdis. My brother was supposed to buy it, but then he didn't. So after Beasts and Monsters, we start getting into more of the typical factions from AOS, and it starts with the Seraphin, used to be known as Lizardmen. So how this book sets up these, this is not just stat blocks. The thing I really like is that it gives you a bit about the faction. We used to like to call this fluff. I'm going to be using the term lore here. Tells you a bit about it. I love everyone. It says including them in your game, using them in your game. So some ideas that if you're not running a printed adventure, if you're doing some kind of homebrew stuff, what kind of ways can you include these in there? What are they typically like? How are they going to interact with your party? That kind of stuff. They have a bunch of different little rumors that you could include in your game, or just little seeds that you can plant for your players. Evening, Wargaming Dad. Welcome. And then using them in combat. Kind of talks about their tactics. What do these different factions do while they're in combat. Not everything just rushes forward like a Khorne Berserker. Obviously, some things do, like a Khorne Berserker, but some things are a little smarter. Talks a little bit about how you can build encounters around these different factions. Like the Seraphin should feel like organized, coordinated combatants. They assist each other often, and they utilize the full breadth of actions rather than just attack mindlessly. So I love these little things they include there. And then there's a little bit of information about each of the different things included. Just a little bit about each one if you're not familiar with them already. It gives you an idea. And almost everything has an image as well, which is great. A lot of them are reused, even going back to old Warhammer Fantasy Army books, like on the shelf behind me here. I definitely recognize some pictures right from those. Some of them I've been colorized, but there's plenty of new artwork as well. And again, we have more of those boxed out little option things here. Talking about the Seraphin, are they, what's the word, a coalesced, or I always forget the other one, Starborn. You can add different extra little rules to them. So just for some ideas, there's the Bastilladon, one of my favorites, giant armored monster, Carnosaur, chameleon skinks, Croxagores, everybody loves them. My father-in-law back in the day played Lizardmen briefly, and he used to call them Croxagores. I'm not really sure where he got the U from, but it was kind of funny. Any dinosaur thing you can think of from AOS is there, and including things like the Saurus Old Blood, Skink Star Priest, and then, of course, everybody's favorite Slan Star Masters, which is an example of one of those chosen, where they have a good amount of wounds, a good amount of toughness, a ton of wounds, and these guys get 4 metal a turn. I think they use it to cast spells partly, so they have a lot of options there. So, Slan are not something that you're starting characters should be going up against anyway, so it's something a little higher level. Up next, we have Beasts of Chaos. Again, it gives us information about them as a faction, using them in your game, using them in combat. Beastmen or Beasts of Chaos are my favorite faction. They were what got me into Warhammer in the first place. If I can talk, that'd be great. Flipping through the Warhammer Fantasy Battles, like 5th or 6th edition rulebook way back in the day, I saw the Beasts of Chaos models, and I was like, that's it, I'm doing that. Dragon Ogres are awesome. So as we go through this book, there are a few little notable omissions I found, which I assume, I kind of hope there'll be like a Bestiary 2 down the line eventually. So like, the Beasts of Chaos are they cover the bases pretty well. You got a Beast Lord, fairly powerful champion. We got a Bulgor, which I was really confused at first. I kept reading it as Doom Bull, and I was like, why is the Bulgor not as good as the Beast Lord? A Doom Bull could wreck a Beast Lord anytime. And then I realized it doesn't say Doom Bull, idiot. It says Bulgor. So I feel like that's one of those things that's kind of missing. I would love to see that higher level Bulgor, like Champion or even Chosen, which would be really powerful. We have some big monsters in the Cygors and Gorgons, and then we have run-of-the-mill Gore, which are your typical Beastmen. This classic image here they got in the book that's been colorized. Love that one. And then another kind of notable absence is there's no Ungor or Centaur, which are my favorite, the Centaur Beastmen. We have Great Bray Shamans, so you have some magic in there. Some other monsters, the Chimera and the Cockatrice, that can turn you to stone. And then the last one for the Beasts of Chaos is the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth, one of my favorite things. This image here is a classic. It's been in every Beasts of Chaos book, at least since the 6th edition book, which only had one more after that anyway. Again, it's been colorized a bit. I absolutely love this picture, and it really encapsulates the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth to me. But they also don't have rules for just regular Dragon Ogres. I forgot to double check if that's something that's in the core book, but I feel like it's not. I'll have to look at that at some point. I don't want to get up and grab my book. It's over there. Up next is the Blades of Khorne. So these are your run forward and smash face. These guys are awesome. They included a lot of the new little things from things like, there was a board game that came with like 4 different Champions of Chaos. That's like super expensive to get now because those models were awesome. They had things like the Deathbringers, Aspiring. We have I almost said Expiring Deathbringer. I mean, they kind of wouldn't mind. Aspiring Deathbringer and Exalted Deathbringer. The Bloodmaster used to be called the Herald of Khorne. Another great image. Rah! Good stuff there. And then your typical things like the new typical things for AOS that have been around since the first edition starter box, like the Blugsecrator that has the big what's it called? The like big standard. His portal of skulls there. We have the Skull Grinder. I think he was the guy that had like a whip and a spear. This says he has a brazen anvil. Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong one. We have Slaughter Priest, the new classic Slaughter Priest that can do kind of like divine magic in a way. We shouldn't call it magic because they're corn, but I think you know what I mean. Wrathmongers. I love these dudes with their like hardened red skin that have like giant hammer flails that fling around. These guys are great. They're called Wrath Flails. We got a Lord of Corn, of course, super nasty. Juggernauts, love these things. These are, again, classic brass demon rhinoceros type monsters that guys ride. Nasty. And then everybody's favorite, Bloodthirster. Oh, love Bloodthirsters. I love their look. They are disgusting in Age of Sigmar, so they are disgusting here. Just to give people an idea, if you haven't looked at these yet, if you know a little bit about the rules of Soulbound, the Bloodthirster is an enormous demon. It's a chosen creature, of course. Its melee is extraordinary, which isn't quite as high as it goes. There is another level above that some monsters have where they call it incalculable, where it counts as one step above extraordinary. It has good ranged, and it has extraordinary defense, so it's hard to hurt, and it's hard to not get hurt by it. This thing has 3 armor, which I think might be as high as it goes. It has 44 toughness. Ha! And then after you get through that toughness, it still has 11 wounds, and it has 4 metal to use, where it gets 1 back every turn, of course, but it has extra metal to do all kinds of stuff. Oh my goodness. Its attacks are disgusting. Its Mighty Axe of Corn, you roll 12d6, and it has 3 focus points. That's something I kind of forgot about to look up. It says plus 3F. And I was like, what is that? It has 3 focus points that it can spend on those. And it does 1 plus success damage. It also has penetrating and slashing. And if an attack from this weapon deals a wound, the severity of the wound increases 1 step. Super deadly. Love it. I'm not going to go through all the rules of it, just to give you an idea of these massive monsters they have. Up next, they have Tzeentch, Disciples of Tzeentch. So these are mortal and demon minions of Tzeentch, including things like the Blue Scribe, the Curseling. So you got some special characters from the tabletop game in here. Flamers, and then a little box out to just basically talk about how to make them Exalted Flamers without having a whole separate stat block. We got things like the Gaunt Summoner and Herald of Tzeentch. And then, of course, the Lord of Change, which is even more disgusting than the Bloodthirster in some ways. Obviously not as good at combat, but it has 46 toughness and 12 wounds and a whole bunch of spells. Real cool stuff, of course. And up next is the Hedonites of Slaanesh, which is just, if you know anything about the new army there, it includes just about everything, including the Fiends. Everybody loves Fiends. This image, I think this is a new image, or it's from the battle tomes for Slaanesh, but this one's really cool. I'm trying to get the glare off of there. I love the creepy aspect of that one. And the Contorted Epitome, which is just one of those weird new things. The AOS, for all its faults, it has allowed the writers and creators of these things at GW to get really wild and just come up with amazing ideas. The Contorted Epitome is one of my favorites. Does it have the guy that they turn into a harp, where they string it up through his back? I forget. Not in this book. Maybe that's in the core book. Slangor, Fiendblood are my favorite. Another Beastman type thing. Slangor are super cool. And then last for chaos stuff, we have the Maggotkin of Nurgle. Of course, we got to include Nurgle. You know, grandfather Nurgle's people's best friends. We got things like the Beast of Nurgle, the Feculent Gnarl Maw, that weird tree terrain piece has its own rules. All the flies and plague drones and poxbringers, and the mortal, sort of mortal followers of Nurgle as well, like Lord of Plagues, Pox Magath, those big dudes. I love this picture because there's the one that's just puking all over. Blah. So Nurgle. And it has my favorite, Sloppity Bilepiper and the Spoilpox Scrivener. I love these things. I have a Spoilpox model. We used in we did a campaign when we used to do battle reports for this before we started the Professional Casual Network. Taylor and I used to play games on For Whom the Die Rolls. All the things are still there on YouTube if you wanted to check them out, where we did a AOS campaign that I wrote on, what was it called? Trouble in the Deeps, where it's Deepkin mostly versus Nurgle demons, but there are also Khorne demons and some dwarves and stuff. I thought it was pretty cool. If you want to check that out and see what kind of things the Spoilpox Scrivener can do. Up next, all-time favorite, right up there with Beast of Chaos, are the Skaven. I love that they continued with these into Age of Sigmar. I'm super happy about that. Includes a lot of cool stuff like the Hell Pit Abomination. It's a fantastic monster. And then real big things, the Storm Fiends that were new just before Age of Sigmar. They are around during the end times, and includes a bunch of different Vermin Lords, which I know the core book has at least one, so we also add the Warbringer, Corruptor, Warp Seer, a whole bunch of different types of Vermin Lords. More way cool art. Love these things as well. After Skaven, we have the Slaves to Darkness, which are more like their typical, they used to just be called Warriors of Chaos, your typical mortal chaos fighters with like Marauders and Warriors, even things like Chaos Spawn. Love those things. More weird monsters. We have the Dark Oath and a General Demon Prince, which is kind of funny. It says Demon Prince, but the picture is clearly Be'lakor, or Belakor, however you want to say his name, with his one broken horn and the Sword of Shadows and everything. And then some cool new things like the Ogroid Myrmidon and the Mind Stealer Spheranx. These are clearly new pictures, or at least new work. These things haven't been around long. I do love the Ogroids. I think those are cool. I need to read more about what those are. Oh, and the Slaughter Brute, again, just looks awesome. Big monsters. Then we have the Flesh Eater Courts, which, okay. I give Age of Sigmar a lot of crap because they killed the old world for it. Flesh Eater Courts almost makes up for it by themselves. I love these guys. Their fluff is so cool because they've just lost it. They think they are these noble, like, debutante people in their minds. All these ghouls and things. I mean, in their names, they have, like, courtier and whatnot. They think that they are the nobility of their area, but they are these horrible-looking monsters that just want to eat flesh. So we have things like the Abhorrent Ghoul King. In this case, it's the Abhorrent Archregent was that picture I just showed. We have the Crypt Gas Courtier and Crypt Haunter Courtier. We have all these cool things. If nothing else, get this book to read about these guys, including them in a campaign needs to happen. I just love the idea of role-playing them where they think they are like a noble at a gala, but they're in this awful debauched area with all these, dead things around them. They are actually really cool. Next up is the Soulblight Grave Lords. Slightly different kinds of undead. This includes more things like zombies and necromancers, and just basic skeletons that get animated. Vampires as well are included here. The Night Haunts were something totally new for Age of Sigmar, which is basically all the ghosts. Anything that was like ethereal things like wraiths and the hex... not hex blades. What were they called? They're in this book, aren't they? The one hex... Yeah, they're hex wraiths. Okay, never mind. Cool stuff here. All the ghosty ghosts, they can be real nasty. I know in the tabletop game they were disgusting. But if you want to include some kind of spooky ghosts, you got the Soulblight. And these were... they were pretty neat that they came out during the second edition of the game because it was all about the Necroquake where Nagash awokened all of these different undead that have been trapped away for a while. Another new undead faction, we have the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, which are like the opposite of the Night Haunt, where if you want something that's super durable, that are just real tough skeleton dudes, you have the Ossiarchs, which are actually pretty cool. I wasn't a huge fan of these when I first saw them, but because they were kind of like Tomb Kings 2.0, and I love the idea of Tomb Kings, but they've really grown on me. I think their aesthetic is really nice. I love that they are super armored. They're much more militarized and disciplined undead. The new free RPG Day adventure, the Reap and Sow, I believe it's called, is all the main enemy of that one is the Bone Reaper, the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, and the whole idea is that in the realm of death, they collect a bone tithe, and if people don't give them bones every so often, periodically, typically every year, they will come and take the bones instead and kill people. So they use the bones to create all of their things and new Bone Reapers and all that. Love these things. They have those big alligator looking things that collect them up. The Gothazar Harvester. Real cool stuff. These guys have really grown on me. Next up, we start getting into destruction instead of death. And we have the Gloom Spike Gits, which if you don't like greenskins, why? What's wrong? They have squigs. Everybody loves squigs. We got those from Mangler squigs. This looked like one of the most disgusting things in the book. Next to, after greater demons. The Mangler Squigs, they count as a chosen. They're so powerful because they're 2 giant squigs chained together. Terrifying, right? We have things like more squigs, squig herds, squig hoppers. If you got guys riding on squigs, we have gargants, which is what the new term for giants. Ale guzzler, gargant is kind of your typical giant troggoths or trolls. And then we have the Ogar Maw tribes as some more destruction, which is more like the what was Ogre Kingdoms, things like the Firebelly and the Gorger. We got new rules for Noblars. I love them, little, even smaller than Goblin dudes. We have some Beast Riders. We got some guys riding a Thunder Tusk, my favorite Ogre monster. I love those things so much. And then the Tyrant here is such a disgusting looking chosen. This dude has 35 toughness and 8 wounds, and armor 3. Like, woof. He's nearly the level of a Bloodthirster. His melee attack's only superb, and his defense is only good. So, not as good as a Bloodthirster, but he shouldn't be. I think almost last for destruction, that's the word, is the Auric War Clans, where you have things like your Iron Jaws, your Mega Bosses, and then we also have Savage Orcs in here as well. It's just kind of all the different Orcs together. There's not the, what's it called? The Maw Crusher is not in this book because that one is in the core book. But we also have things like a Wurgog Prophet and a War Chanter, little mix of all the new Auric stuff. The last faction here is the Sons of Bahamut. Bahamut. I'm not actually sure how to say that. I need to look at a video that GW puts out to see how they pronounce that. Bahamut, where we have Mega Gargants and the Man Crusher Gargant, which is kind of in between. But the Mega Gargant is on the level of Greater Demons. This is where we get a melee skill of Incalculable. Its range attack is good, and its defense is extraordinary. It has 40 toughness, 10 wounds, and its attacks are just disgusting. It has, the Almighty Stomp is 15d6 with +3 focus and 1+ success level damage. And this attack deals damage to all creatures within close range of the Mega Gargant. Just disgusting what this thing can do. Then we have a pretty sweet index if you want to look up anything alphabetically at the end. It's the last page of it. It has all that. So that's the overview of the Bestiary. So overall, I think this is a fantastic book. If you play Soulbound, it's a must-buy. If you're playing through the campaigns like Shadows in the Mist, which I'd like to do at some point, it's not 100% necessary at this point, but I think anything coming out in the future is going to reference it regularly. And like I said, I think it's a great book to have for all the lore in it. If you want to learn anything about any of these different creatures, these different monsters, it's absolutely worth to check it out. I think it's beautifully done. I love Cubicle 7's level of production quality. We even have like the embossed, slightly different. We can get it here, but you can see the titles of it are nice and shiny. I love the feeling of their books, which might seem ridiculous, but it's a high quality. Even things like on the back of the book, we have things like the barcode and like the licensed product logos and stuff have that nice little shiny quality to them that feel really nice. The binding is great. These are, what's the word for it? Like, if you look close, I don't think this camera's going to be able to pick it up well, but it has that threaded binding. So even if some of the glue comes undone, it's not going to come apart real easily. The inside cover has some sweet artwork. I believe it's the same on the reverse, on the back inside cover, I guess you call it. So overall, that quality is fantastic. It's real sturdy. And again, it's not like a super thin book. There's a lot to it. There's so much new content in this that if you have any interest in Age of Sigmar at all, I think this is a great source book just for that. So I'm not going to give it like a score. It's not doing that kind of review here. It's more just like what's in it. And I want to take just a second for people watching this live. If anybody has any questions about the book, about the physical copy edition or anything like that, or if you haven't looked at the PDF, anything else about the content of it, I'll take just a moment to see if anybody has any questions in the chat there to see what is going on with it. So I take a minute to see if any of that shows up. I want to talk about other things here at the Professional Casual Network. Like I said before, I am the GM and I guess host of a Grim Podcast, A Perilous Adventure, which is the network's Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition actual play. We're playing through The Enemy Within. At time this being live, tomorrow we have, I believe it's episode 76, and the party is in the middle of Death on the Reich, which is one of the greatest adventure books ever, and we are loving it. It's such a great time. We've built a great community within players of this game. If you haven't checked out Gapapa, as we like to call it, do yourself a favor, check it out. I just yesterday added a new disclaimer to the start of episode 0 to say, don't worry, our audio quality gets way better. Grow with us as you listen through. Going back and listening to the early episodes is like, I didn't realize it was that not great. And new episodes, it's right up there with the top quality podcasts out there because we have some sweet equipment thanks to our patrons in large part. You can join us and support us at patreon.com/professionalcasual, where you get all kinds of bonus stuff. We have video for almost all of our podcasts, the bonus there at the $5 tier and above. One of our podcasts we also stream live every week on YouTube, so I can't say all of our podcasts have video over there, but all of our podcasts do have video in some capacity. At the $1 tier, you get access to our Discord. I should say our $1 tier and above, you get access to our Discord, which is a great place. Super supportive community. Something special there, I really feel like. We also have we're going to be adding very soon for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We will be creating original monsters and NPCs that we'll be releasing at the $5 and $10 tier. At the $5 tier, you'll be able to pick which system you want NPCs and monsters for. It'll be coming out every other week. And at the $10 tier, you get both. Also, the $10 tier, you get exclusive podcast access, and very early video access to our second Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay actual play, Settling the Southlands, which is a homebrew campaign written by me, with most of the original cast of Gapapa coming back with all new characters. That is just fantastic. That game is amazing. I have to give so much prop to the players for that one because their characters are what really make it. I think the adventure's pretty good, but their characters are just stellar. It's so good. That is also coming out on the YouTube, but at a very delayed rate with just the video. The podcast version is exclusively behind the Patreon wall, where that comes out once a month. So if you want to get it twice as fast, you can get it on the Patreon. We also have, of course, we have a lot of stuff about Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is currently our favorite miniatures war game. Where on Monday nights, I hear on this twitch.tv/Professional Casual Network, we play. The Power Phase is the name of our show where we play Marvel Crisis Protocol. This past week, we had some new blood where Dani's brother Tyler learned the game. He loved it. He wants to come back for more, which is awesome. I believe this week I'm going to be playing Tim, this week being is it going to be October 31st, I think? I don't have my calendar right here. I think Tim and I are going to play, and he's made up his own unique extraction, which is really, Crisis, which is really fun. We also have Wait Did I Roll a Wild, which is our talk show about Marvel Crisis Protocol. That's what we stream on Thursdays on our YouTube, where we talk about all things MCP. And then we also have another actual play. If you're really into RPGs, we have the Lost Omens podcast, where Dani runs Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We're playing the Extinction Curse campaign, and that just constantly gets better. Every time we record, I'm like, this show just gets better and better and better, and it's so good. It's so much fun. The characters there are so deep, and there's so much interaction between them. That's all great. And then last but not least, of course, on Fridays, we have Elite 8 Showdown, which is Big Chuck and Tim talk about 8 things going head-to-head, and there's a lot of yelling, and it's really funny, and it's a great show. You should check that one out as well. Other than that, I'm going to say thank you for joining me. Let me know what you think of Soulbound. Let me know what you think of the Bestiary. What are you doing with this game? What's going on with it? Have anybody? I definitely want to hear in the comments if people have played Shadows in the Mist at all. I'd love to hear how that's going because I'm really interested in that campaign. I haven't read it yet, but I'd like to and eventually run it, of course. Other than that, if you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Check us out at professionalcasual.com. I'd love to do more of these as long as people enjoy them. Other than that, I say have a good time. keep gaming, and we'll see you in the next show.